Welcome back to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the Tesla Roadster podcast. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Hey, Pete, real quick, I'm going to test out a camera thing that we have going on. We have a little bit of a camera update.
All right, there we go. You're able to zoom in on each of us. Oh, wow, you're going to be even busier now, Jesse.
Wow,
switching
look at
back
that.
and forth.
So we got some new cameras we're going to be testing out this show.
Now that looks
cool.
really good, and I have to admit, that camera that's on me is a hidden camera. I don't see it anywhere.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Where are they, Jesse?
So
Did you buy something without me being able to see it?
Of course not. I would never. No, it's just a software thing. So.
Oh, it is software.
Yeah, you have your close-up camera over there, but then on the main camera, I'm doing a kind of an enhancement on Mark just to blow it up a little bit so it's still the main shot.
oh, very cool, very cool.
Yeah.
You guys work wonders without spending money.
Yeah.
That always makes me happy. Well, anyway, for those of you joining us, thank you. We're having fun here already. Again, if you have any questions, we will answer them. Let us know where you're coming in from. Today, we thought we would lead with an interesting repair that we do with Tesla Roadsters that really went full circle.
Mm-hmm.
The car behind me is a car that came to us from Naples, Florida. And it went something like this. The car was losing 12 to 13 miles of range every time the customer charged it. It had dropped from 170 down to 150 when they first called us. And then we described to them what's going on. It's a resistive cell. And it's probably a rapidly declining cell, one that is more aggressive than most that we've seen. Sometimes it's, 2 to 3 miles per charge or per month even, but, there's a decline. So we knew that this one, we needed to hurry in order to save that battery pack. And we started the transport process. Now, we don't own the transporters. We subscribe to Central Dispatch, which is a nationwide service that represents thousands of transporters to do various types of hauling. And we usually put that into their queue, and then we get bids. Well, it turns out that with this particular one, there were a bunch of false starts. The first transporter, I think, was supposed to be there, then he didn't show, and he got sidetracked.
Right.
And then the second one, it was something similar to that. And in the meantime, each time this customer charged her Roadster, it was losing even more mileage. What we were hoping was that she could drive it onto the transporter and there would be enough juice left in the battery where you could drive it off the transporter, which is always more convenient and less expensive, because if you have a locked Roadster or a dead brick Roadster, then they have to think carefully about placement. You don't want to put that in the middle of the transporter, because in order to get the cars out in front of it, you have to move out a dead car. And that requires rigging and forklifts and winches, and, it gets complicated. So as it turned out, time, of course, was of the essence. But when it finally left Florida, it had 30 miles range at the pickup location, and we knew that it was not going to be able to be driven off the transporter by the time it got here. It usually takes from Florida 5 days or so. It arrived actually 5 days later. It was hard bricked at this point. We got it off the transporter, and what we do is we then immediately put it on life support. That particular brick, and it's usually only one brick, and ironically only one cell out of 6,831 that causes the symptom.
Mm-hmm.
And the sensible thing to do is to keep that brick above 2 volts so that it doesn't stay or spend any time below 2 volts, which is where that destructive chemical process takes place with 18650 cells.
Now, when a Roadster gets bricked, that does not necessarily mean that one brick that has gone resistive is already below 2 volts. It's that it's low enough charge that the car will not try to charge it any further.
Correct. And I think the cutoff is around 3 volts when the Roadster battery safety management system decides we're not going to even attempt a charge at this point.
Right.
And then the more time goes by, of course, it gets lower and lower. So, guys, if you can bring up the first image, and we can show what we did with the Roadster as soon as it came in. And by the way, when we get these Roadsters that are in this condition, At our service center, it is immediately all hands on deck. What we do is we get the car off as quickly as we can. We then start the life support process, and here you can see one of our engineers that is backing up the VMS before we start diagnostics and identify or re-identify which sheet and brick are having issues. Now, the reason I phrase it that way is we have a log file parsing program that we ask customers to get a log file from their Roadster before it goes completely dead. And what that allows us to do is to zero in on precisely where the problem is occurring in the car. And we had done this before the car came in, so we knew what sheet it was, we knew which brick it was. And by the time it got here, we replicated that process along with some other things that we typically do. We will back up your Roadster. We back up the vehicle management system software, and we keep that on file. Roadsters at times lose their mind.
Yes.
They get corrupted. The VMS gets corrupted. So we will have a working backup for your car should that ever occur. So we did that. We started the diagnostics and then reconfirmed the brick. So let's go to the next image, guys. And what we're showing you here is the software that we use to identify what sheet and what brick it is. Those little blue lines that you see in the upper portion there are 99 blue lines. Each one of those is a brick. A brick in a Tesla Roadster is a collection of 69 18650 cells connected in parallel. That's where the problem lies. When one of those cells goes resistive in that group of 69, it's extremely difficult to identify which of the 69 is resistive. And that's one of the things that we have perfected. Extremely accurately, we're able to identify which cell within that brick is causing the problem. And here you can see the sheets, by the way, start on the left, and there's a little gray dotted line there. So we've got sheet 1, 2, 3. It's sheet number 3, brick number 9 is where the problem is. So let's go to the next image.
And on that image, we don't have to go back to it, but one of the things that I see on that image as having done some of this technician work before is that every other brick there is sitting just right at 4 volts.
Right.
That gives me hope that we have actually a really good quality battery, except for this one particular brick.
We'll hold that thought, because at the end of this, we'll show how good this battery actually was, except for that one cancerous cell.
Okay.
So here's what's happening. We have a power supply that is injecting DC voltage directly to the brick level. We have special boards that extend and replace the BMB board, as they're called in the Tesla Roadster, the battery management board. So it replaces that board. We have an extension board, and now we're able to access each of the bricks on that sheet. And what's happening here is we're charging that, and if I can see the voltage, usually about 3 volts or so, and very low current, by the way, because you have a resistive cell. And what we're doing here is keeping this car on life support. This is the same thing they do when you get to a triage unit. I can't say that. Triage unit in a hospital. And they keep the patient on life support until they can go in for surgery. And we find it humorous that we do use a lot of medical metaphors in the Tesla Roadster repair business.
Yeah, basically you're feeding that battery just enough voltage, just enough electricity, basically, to keep that resistive cell from continuing to drain the other cells in that brick.
The other 68 cells, it's being fed intravenously. There's another medical metaphor.
Yes.
All right. So at this point, the car is safe. And then it waits for lift time. Now, we have 11 lifts in this building alone, but they are very busy at times, so it may be a few days or a week or two before this car will go on the lift for surgery. Let's go to the next image here. All right, so right after a battery pull, and we're not showing this in these images, but up on a lift, the 1,000-pound battery gets dropped. We crack it open. We pull out that sheet. We then use special test equipment to isolate that one resistive cell. And people always ask, well, how do you replace the cell? Is it like a flashlight where you open it up and you take out your AAA battery or whatever, your 18650, and you swap it out? We don't do any of that. The reason is, in the Tesla Roadster battery sheets, you have 621 lithium-ion cells that are connected in series and parallel, and you have plates on both sides. In order to even attempt to remove a cell, you would have to remove these bonding plates, which have, hundreds of connections on them, fusible link wires.
Right.
On both sides, by the way, because they fuse both the positive and the negative side of the 18650 cell. The second problem, and this is the main reason you can't change that battery cell, you have a thermal potting compound that is injected in between two plastic clamshells that hold these 621 cells together. And that potting compound is hard like epoxy.
Right.
But the final reason is every single cell gets touched by a cooling jacket that runs traversely through that battery pack. And in order to take a cell out, you would most likely damage that cooling jacket, and now all bets are off, because how are you going to get inside that cell and all that potting compound to weld that aluminum back together if you even could?
Right. So if it were a standard radiator, it's like you're saying, I want to take and go inside the fins of the radiator with a pair of tweezers and pull out a blockage.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. Now, Ray Johnson has a really relevant question for this as it relates to the Model S. He says, on the resistive cell, sheet number 3, brick number 9, is that akin to the BMS U029 Model S alert or the BMS U018 alert?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Ray. And by the way, I had a brain cramp last week. Somebody asked about the BMS 018 alert, and that is a dying cell as well.
Yes.
So yes, the answer to that is it's identical. These are 18650 cells. It's the same type of problem. And as you get one cell in a brick or a collection of cells in parallel going resistive, it will then create a voltage delta between the other bricks, and that's what the battery safety management system senses and shuts down the car or limits the charge ability or the range.
Correct. And the Model S has a little bit newer and more sophisticated software. So rather than allowing the cell to just shut down, it'll effectively block the electricity from that one module. Here we call them sheets. In the Model S, we call them modules.
Modules, yes.
And so that helps to extend the life, however limited it may be, of that Model S battery.
So the final part of this procedure, like in this particular car, this Tesla Roadster, we find that one cell that has gone rogue. And all we need to do is clip out one side of the fusible link. We take it out of circuit, essentially.
Okay.
And the car never realizes that 1 out of 6,831 cells has gone MIA. And we've done a lot of experimentation and testing with this concept. We had some test mule Roadsters back in the day before Tesla was making replacement battery packs for the Roadster. Now think about this. This is a pretty scary proposition. You've got a car that you spent over $100,000 for. You know that that battery is not going to last forever, but you have no solutions. There are no aftermarket vendors, no third parties, and Tesla for a while, after the 2016 pack came out and they had problems with it, no one was making any batteries for the Roadsters. And the pricing on those Roadsters was proportionate. I mean, you could buy a functioning Roadster in 2020 or so for about $40,000. $39,500 on eBay, I remember.
Yeah, and I remember Roadsters that were functioning clean title, but did not have a good working battery were going for as little as $10,000 to $12,000.
So during that time, we were doing some experimentation and some analysis with the Roadster battery sheets to see how many cells could be clipped before it affected the performance of the cars. Now, we're in communication with a lot of the early pioneers at Tesla. excellent engineers that developed this pack, the ESS pack. And their suggestion was you can't clip any more than 4 out of 69.
Right.
But they weren't quite sure what the failure mode would be. Would it blow the fuse? Would it lose power? Would the firmware choke and stop driving the car? It turns out that we clipped as many as 17 cells out of 69 and were shocked that the car continued to drive and had power. Our goal with that was, if until a solution came along, at least we would be able to keep Tesla Roadsters on the road with this kind of a fix.
Right. And that way it gave us a little bit of an idea. And we know from our power services, when you get 2 batteries, you have one battery that is 69 amp hours and a second battery that is 60 amp hours. They're close, but there will tend to be a little bit of over time reduction in capability of both batteries, because your 60 amp hour battery will tend to get overcharged when the charging takes place. The 69 amp hour battery will tend to go too low. And if each of these cells were equivalent to 1 amp hour, it's like what would happen if you clipped out 9 cells.
You remember those 3 very expensive chargers and conditioners we bought out of China about 10 years ago or so?
I do.
Those actually have the ability, and we use this in the critical power world. If you have a string of batteries on a UPS that's aged 2 years, let's say, and you get one battery, one 12-volt battery that goes defective out of a string of 40, you can't just simply put a brand new 12-volt battery into that string, because, like you say, you then have a charging imbalance. One's going to draw more current than the other. So what these chargers, conditioners allow us to do is to degrade that battery to the same level as the 2-year-old batteries in that UPS.
Right.
All right, so continuing then, right after the battery pull on that image that we had, you see the glowing amber charge light where the cable is plugging in the yellow cable. There's actually a celebration in our service center whenever we get this after a tough repair, because this tells you that you fixed the car. You may still have a few other problems, whether it's suspension or low-tech auto stuff, but the electronics are functioning in the car.
Yeah.
And that's most important.
And that's what's the most important. That means you have a successful surgery. Now, we have another question here that I want to get to. Niles chimed in on YouTube, and he says, what makes a cell go resistive? Is it bad construction and poor quality control at Tesla at the time?
I am not the engineer that can get to that level where we can speak about electrolyte levels and dendrite growth and molecular activity and electron flows and all of that. It seems to be most likely a manufacturing defect. It could be some corruption in the process. But it does happen, and it is infrequent, and they're aberrations, which is the good news. Now, the only time it's not an aberration, we're deviating here, but let's go with it. In the Tesla Roadsters in 2016, there was a battery pack that was a replacement battery pack that was developed by Tesla. And people back in 2016, the oldest ones were 8-year-old cars because they came out in 2008. People did not change their batteries back then because they had failed due to age. They changed them most likely because they wanted the additional range. We had gone from 53 kW with around 180 miles range in standard mode to 80 kW, which would give you closer to 300 miles or 250 plus. And it turns out that batch of cells that was selected has some issues. They went to a Korean company, LG, from Panasonic, Sony, and so they ended up using LG cells, and these cells proved, as time went on, to not be as robust as the original legacy battery packs.
Right.
And that's exactly what we did months ago when we, in fact, end of last year, when we dived into the power losing Roadsters, where the pedal felt squishy. We had a customer in the Malibu Hills that couldn't even get up the hills anymore to drive it to his house. And it was driving like an ice car. And that was because these LG cells were not as robust and not as high quality as the original Panasonic Sanyo cells.
Yeah, continuing down that rabbit hole, I'm the one that led the team to do the investigation and try to figure out what was happening. And my eureka moment, and subsequently the team's, was when I thought back to a 2014 and 2015 situation that we had with Gruber Power Services, where we learned that our manufacturer had not adequately filled our sealed lead acid batteries with enough electrolyte. They had filled it somewhere between half and 2/3 full instead of to the level it was supposed to go to. As a result, these batteries started to fail about a year later, and these were supposed to be 3-year batteries. When we took the concept, then went and found that the research from the IEEE corroborated the concept in the lithium ion space, and then went and looked at log files and did some testing on how the batteries performed real time
Under load with a laptop while being driven.
Yeah.
Looking at voltages, current flows, and levels.
Yeah, we did all the testing to prove out the theory, and discovered that, yeah, sure enough, the same impedance issues that had been occurring for us in 2014 and 2015, or for our customers, were occurring on these Roadsters as well. And so that was effectively our smoking gun to say, hey, we've got a bigger issue than just a single resistive cell. We have a battery that truly is going to end of life.
Now, having said all of this, the original design expectation or life expectation for the Tesla Roadster battery was 10 years. JB told me a couple of years ago, he says it has a 10-year design life, and he had 2 Roadsters at the time. He has 3. That he was pleasantly surprised that at that point they were going on 13, 14 years, and no one really knew how long they would last.
Right.
Currently, there are a lot of legacy packs still out there that are going on 15 years now. About 2008, let's do the math. Yeah, 15 years, right?
15 years.
Yeah. And actually, Tesla has also revised their life expectancy on their stationary power systems now. They're saying that the power walls can go to 20 or 22 years life.
Yes.
The bottom line was no one knew how long this new lithium-ion 18650 technology would really last, because not enough time had gone by yet.
And if you have, kind of getting back to Niles's question, is it bad construction? Is it poor quality? I would say it's probably neither, because we're talking about 10 years after the cell is put into service, or as much as 15 years after the cell is put into service. One cell out of 6,800 and however many, 31, has gone bad. Okay, so you're talking, less than 1,000th or less than 100% on your cells going bad. That's a pretty good manufacturing rate in my mind.
I agree. I think that the multi-cell lithium-ion battery technology is probably one of the most successful designs ever, and that is manifested by how many EV manufacturers are following that design.
Yes.
And using it. So another question from Niles. He's saying, can one log into a Roadster if the owner permits? Well, there's a 2G capability in the Roadsters, which is now dead, that Tesla used to access a Tesla Roadster remotely through. There is a new box. It's a black box, basically, called Open Vehicle Management System, developed by some engineers in China and Texas, by the way. And that little black box has a more current connection technology, 4G, and I think 5G now as well.
Yeah, I think Mark Webb Johnson runs that particular company out of Hong Kong. And I believe he has a 5G generation now. It's like their 6th or 7th generation box.
And we highly recommend that to any Roadster owner, because that reestablishes the ability for remote connection, not just for a service organization like us, but for the customer with their cell phone. So when you're on vacation and your circuit breaker tripped because a thunderstorm came through, you can alert your neighbor and say, reset my breaker because my Roadster's about to brick in a month or so, without a charge.
Yeah. So the short answer, Niles, is yes, one can log into a Roadster if the owner permits, but only through the OVMS system.
Yes. Ed Prelitz with YouTube asks, after your experiment of clipping individual cells, what was the end result for lowest total string voltage? By clipping cells, voltage does not change because with 69 cells connected in parallel, even just one will give you 4 volts.
Right.
It was the amp hour capacity that would be affected, or the amount of energy in that brick. And we were surprised. 17 of them clipped, and no noticeable change in power and performance. So if Tesla ever suspends or stops making ESS battery packs, at least there's one way to keep it alive until aftermarket comes along and develops a product.
Yeah. Did we ever get a calculated amp hour capacity for that one brick that we clipped the 17 cells on?
No, we did not. We didn't get that deep into it at that time, although later on we got a device called Draggy, which is a little black box that you can carry with you in the car, and by using GPS positioning, it will actually give you performance characteristics from the car, like your 0 to 60, which, by the way, we're now using, and we're going to give printouts with all of the Roadsters that we repair, showing the performance curve or the performance characteristics
be
of the
fun.
Roadster.
Of course, it's an excuse for you to drive fast.
Well, that too, yeah. All right, so I think we have another picture here, another image. We saw the one with the charge port now lit, and the next image will show us the battery. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Roadsters, 183 miles in standard mode means about 80% charge is close to what this car was when it was new.
That's right.
That was about 12 years ago or more.
That's right. When the car was new, I happened to see from a different customer, the gentleman, Mike Maloney, was here a couple of weeks ago. He owns a more than one Roadster, and he gave us paperwork for one of them that he's going to be trying to sell. And it had the original service certificates and stuff like that from Tesla, including the original estimates of the range. And standard mode is 185 miles, it said.
Perfect. All right, so we're 2 miles shy of that. Now, of course, if there was another resistive cell, it would be nowhere near this level, but we're usually extremely good at catching any other cells, and it's rare to have 2.
Right.
It's a serious anomaly. One out of those goes bad. They don't usually fail in tandem or triplicate or whatever. So there we have the end result of this repair, and then the final version, or the final image here, or one of the last ones anyway, is the calculated amp hour capacity. And again, 153. It's another image, guys. There we go. Is remarkable. Anything in the 150s these days, with the amount of aging that the Roadsters have gone through, is an anomaly.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable as well, because the calculated amp hour capacity, I was reading in that same documentation, 155 calculated amp hours. So for something to drop far less than 1% like that is just remarkable after that many years.
So the bottom line here is a bricked or a resistive cell Roadster is quite repairable, but a number of parameters have to be met. It needs a quick response. It needs to get to our service center quickly. We need to put it on life support. There's not a lot of time to dilly-dally and wait and, because it will decline. And if that brick goes bad, now the entire sheet needs to be replaced. And Tesla does not sell sheets. The only sheets available are from donor cars.
Right.
And donor cars typically come from auctions, collision damaged. And the auction time, we call it jail, title jail, could be as much as 6 months to 9 months. And that's ample time to kill that battery.
Because most of the time, the cars that are at auction do not have the service plug pulled.
They don't have the service plug pulled, and the auction houses will not charge a Tesla Roadster. First of all, these cars are oftentimes out in a field somewhere without any power.
Right.
And then if you're lucky and you do get one in an enclosed building where power is available, they say, we're not mechanics. It's not their job,
Yeah, we're an auction group. We're not mechanics.
Right. And then the worst part is they will advertise that collision damaged car when it came in with some mileage on it as a runs and drives car.
Right.
And then the fine print says, well, it ran and drove when it got here. 6 months later, if it's dead, that's your problem.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing. Now on the Model S, this is kind of going back to what Ray Johnson had asked. We currently have a wait list of customers who want us to do battery
Yes.
work on the Model S. You can call or you can email us, ev@gruber.com, if you want interest, but you would be put onto the list at that point. The good news is I've started to see Model S vehicles coming through our shop.
We're clearing the backlog.
We're finally starting to clear
Yes.
that backlog, and so I that's why I wanted to mention that today. If this were a few months ago, I probably wouldn't have even said anything.
Yeah, this is a classic cliche phrase. There is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
TikTok Van Goatwagon says, "Good day, Gruber Group. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for
Appreciate
being
you."
back, Van Goat. Good
Yeah.
to see you.
So this picture that we took here is of that same Tesla Roadster. It's at the Point Tapatio Cliffs. It's one of my favorite spots that I take pictures of the cars because you've got some elevation, you've got some beautiful mountains. By the way, that mountain in the middle, there's some houses in front of it. The white ones is where I live. So it's close to my house as well, which makes it really convenient. And when you catch the lighting here, during golden hour, which in Phoenix is usually spectacular, sunsets and,
Oh yeah.
you can get some really nice pictures up here. All right, so moving right along here. Looks like we don't have any questions to currently work on. All right. We found that Tesla watches these videos, which is flattering. And the reason we know that is we had a vendor come out about 6 months ago or so, Fein Tools, Fein, that was convinced that a tool that they used in the medical world to cut casts off of broken limbs, basically, would be usable in the battery repair space, especially Model S. And the reason is that it's a vibrating blade, and in order to take a cast off, you can't use a chainsaw or a saber saw because you're going to damage tissue underneath it.
Right.
So this little blade actually does not injure the tissue, but it vibrates at a frequency that cuts through that cast. And they felt that with the right tool or the right blade, this might be a great tool to take the lid off of Model S 1,200-pound battery packs. I don't have a picture of them, probably should have bought one, but if you can picture this, it's a flat 1,200-pound type pack, and it has a steel lid over the top that is held down by caulking compound, which is pretty difficult to get through. And we've tried a variety of different methods. We used air tools for a while. That was a bit too aggressive. Then we went to a manual method with a brass hammer on a perfectly shaped piece of stainless steel that we had to sharpen routinely. But it was still a pretty labor-intensive process because someone was literally sitting there chipping like this around the perimeter, which total probably was 30 feet or so based on the size of this pack. So they came out, they brought the tool, and lo and behold, it was a major improvement over what we were done, and our guys loved it. So we did a video to promote their company and show how we use the tool, which is what we do here at Gruber Motor Company. Whenever we get a good procedure or we're proud of something, we'll do a video with sunglasses too, by the way. We'll get to
of
that in a
course.
moment here, Richard. Yeah. So it turns out that Tesla watched this video and they invited this vendor up to Lathrop, California, where they do the battery reman for the large battery packs. And they fell in love with a tool like we did. And it turns out that it looks like Fein is going to be doing some business with Tesla. And they thanked us profusely for opening that door for them. We were just flattered by the fact that Tesla's watching our videos.
And we're very thankful for Fein Tools that they were able to, they obviously were watching our videos and hearing about us as well, and had the good sense, as it were, to come to us and say, hey, we think we have a better solution for you.
Right, exactly. So we've got another image to pop up here, Jesse. It is the Tesla calendar. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, TesCalendar.jpg. This is a group that does a yearly Tesla calendar, and they're looking for inputs from the Roadster community. They only had, I think, one Roadster in the last calendar, and it looks like they would like to get some more. Now, the reason that you might want to do this is, first of all, your Roadster may become immortalized on a calendar somewhere. And I don't know what the circulation of this is, but it may be sizable. There's also some prizes with the winners of the images that they select. The first thing you're going to get is a package from Scent Wedge, which is I think you guys are going to have to go to a website to bring that up. It's it's an automotive scent type product with various types of scents, a complete package that you can hang off your rearview mirror, and it'll improve the odors in your car.
Okay.
The second thing that you will get is a $25 Amazon gift certificate, and of course you'll be featured in the TesCalendar as a result, or your photo will be. For those of you interested in more information, I've got the Tesla Roadster Owners Group title up there. This is a Facebook group that is reserved for Tesla Roadster owners. So if you have a Roadster, all you need to do is sign up for this and join the rest of the owners that are out there. We limit it to owners only. That keeps out all the scammers and all the people selling T-shirts and the colognes and even some of the Tesla items, the tequila and the flamethrower and whatever else.
Yeah.
Tires, wheels, parts, and all of that. What you will need is the last 4 digits of your VIN code, and most Roadster owners know what that is. That's how we identify our cars, you know. But feel free to join, and there's information there and something you can click on that will take you to the application form for this Tesla calendar.
Has anyone, any of our Tesla owners, Roadster owners, come to us and said, I'd like to enter this. Would you guys be willing to take a couple pictures of my car?
You know, that's a good question. We have a lot of cars here. And yeah, if we do quality pictures like this, that might get them into that calendar.
What about Midjourney? Think they would accept any Midjourney images? That might be a dangerous road to go down, but
well, it might quickly be discovered because remember, it'll put a gas cap on one side of the Roadster. Or it puts a wing on the back of a Roadster. We have a lot of fun with Midjourney, and it doesn't seem to be improving, by the way, guys, because I keep trying to render a 2008 Tesla Roadster, and it still puts weird design elements into it that aren't on the car. And sometimes you have to be fairly knowledgeable and astute to find it, you know, if you know Roadsters well.
Obviously, you haven't tried using Firefly yet. That is the new AI generating tool for Adobe.
Oh, really?
And it's part of the Adobe product.
Jesse was showing me something that some of its capabilities.
There's a bunch of stuff released for Photoshop recently too.
Yeah, it's let's just say it's not up to Midjourney's level yet.
Okay, all right. So we'll have to try it just for laughs.
Yeah, you'll get some good laughs, I think.
And then share some of those, yeah. All right, TikTok, Van Goatwagon says, any more news on the Roadsters that came from China? Hang tight because we have a number of pictures we're going to show you here shortly.
And then Niles, he's at the top of the screen here. He said, Jordan Gasigi posted on YouTube his cost and capacity predictions for different battery chemistries up until 2030.
Wow.
It's well worth looking at. It's a conservative outlook, but probably very realistic. That one's one I think we'll have to try to watch.
Yeah, we're very anxious to see the new battery technologies and chemistries evolving because if the improvements continue on the exponential scale that we've seen just in the last decade, there are probably some exciting things going to be occurring.
Yeah. This guy on YouTube asks, is Tesla partnering with anyone that offers antimicrobial technology for their AC or their interior? I hear rumors of Activity products.
You know, I don't know that. You guys have any information on that? I know there's a larger HEPA filter that you can get in some of the cars. I think it's an add-on or a additional feature.
Yeah, there's a good HEPA filter. I'll look more into the actual antimicrobial, but we'll have to look more into that.
Okay.
You know, I've often wondered that myself. Back in the ice days, you know, if you were in traffic, you were probably exposed to a substantial amount of carbon monoxide,
Mm-hmm.
especially in Europe, where you're going through the Alps and you have a 20-kilometer tunnel. Now, granted, they do a pretty good job of trying to exhaust that, but I'm sure that it's not completely efficient.
Well, I mean, have you ever left one of those tunnels with a headache?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that's probably why. All right, and then we've got YouTube. Jan M3P says, would it be possible to repair the 4680 battery pack if one cell became resistive? You know, the jury's still out on with us regarding that. We did a session with Sandy Munro where they took one of these apart and found different ways to get rid of that pink poly material. They eventually selected dry ice, sandblasting dry ice, which took off the material. What we were envisioning once we get one in our service center is a number of things. One of them, once we open it up, of course, is to do an archaeological dig and potentially use something like dry ice. But I think the majority of innovation on our part is going to be developing software that helps us isolate which resistive cell is causing the problem, or at least localizing it into an area.
Yeah, I think until we can get more information on exactly how these 4680 battery packs are structured, I mean, I'm not even sure if we know if they're modular in the same way that the existing packs are. I'm going to assume so, but we don't know if that pink polystyrene, if that is going to inhibit our ability to even get to the cells or not. So there's a lot of questions for that. And we don't see newer stuff yet.
Well, yeah, and that's the explanation is that we're in the post-warranty business. If anybody has a warranty on their vehicle, they get free service at Tesla. We can't do that. We're not the source of warranty. We have to charge. So we typically don't see anything until it comes out of warranty, and this is a new technology that we have not yet seen.
Yeah. Now, Niles has a response to your comment earlier about the rate of change in batteries. He says the batteries, they won't, Justin Gasegi claims, because when we move closer to physical limits, our gains become smaller.
Interesting. So it's a declining process, basically.
Yeah, my only reply to that might be, is there going to be something like Moore's Law with batteries?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Moore's Law is a technology law that basically one of the early CEOs of Intel said the rate that technology is changing is such that we're going to double capacity every 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that doubling of capacity, for a number of times over the years, people have come up and said, well, I guess Moore's Law must not be a law because we're not going to double capacity. It's physically impossible to do so. But then an innovation comes out from a single-threaded CPU to a multi-core CPU, a smaller etchings for instead of a 9 nanometer etching, you go to 7, then you go to 5, and now we're going down to 4 nanometers.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things allow electricity to flow faster inside these CPUs. It allows the CPUs to process more information with the same type of energy. And basically, it's a new technology every time that changes the game. I don't know 45 years later if Moore's Law has been broken yet when it comes to technology. Is that same kind of thing going to happen in batteries? A new chemistry comes out, and that new chemistry completely changes the game, and all predictions for current chemistries, while they might hold true, are now irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. And the word impossible, again, is annihilated and destroyed. You know, any great innovator or a great engineer is challenged by the word impossible.
Yeah.
It is not a barrier. They don't stop.
Yeah. They take the same attitude that our IT team takes. Difficult, you do right away. Impossible takes just a little longer.
Right. Yeah. And a challenge is to solve it. All right. So we've got a picture here. Let me bring that one up as well. I think I've got it out here. Yeah. Um, VIN number 143, guys. And this was from a Facebook post on the Tesla Roadster owners group. Here's one for you, they say. A 2007 serial number 143, front and center, at the Tesla store in Peabody, Massachusetts. Flawless, inside and out, not for sale, no test drive, no sit and touch, unknown backstory. Well, I can add a little bit of flavor to that. In recent conversations with Tesla Corporate, and discussing the fate of the Roadster in the future and the challenges we face and on, they did mention that some of these buyback Roadsters are being reserved for display purposes because Tesla would like to, display what their roots were. And this is probably one of those cars. They did mention that in the Northeast, there was one in the showroom, and that probably fits this description. Now, it being a 2007 is really interesting because technically the Roadster was not released till 2008.
Right.
So, and when this customer says VIN or serial number 143, he didn't mention whether it was a signature, or no, it couldn't have been signature in the U.S. Was it VIN 143? Was it a validation prototype? Was it an EP? I don't think any of those went that high, though. I'm talking myself out of that.
No, the validation prototypes and engineering prototypes and founder series, all three, did not go up to 143. In fact, even the signature series only goes up to 100 for VIN numbers. So
in the U.S.
In the U.S. The signature series in Europe went up to 250. I think the year would have been 2008. However, there happened to be 3 2010 Roadsters that I think Tesla should add to this program.
I fully agree. By the way, I don't know how our poll is doing. We started a poll on Twitter asking people to chime in and vote on where the 3 Chinese orphaned barn find Roadsters should go. And the question was, should they go into the gigafactories on display in the front lobbies? And I haven't checked it in a couple of days.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. One sec.
What was noteworthy, though, we had an 80-20 rule applied to the voting. 20% of the people said no. They didn't necessarily give a reason. Well, one did. He said, no, you can't do that. They'll probably part it out. Being facetious.
Okay.
Looks like it's still at 80-20.
It is still, okay.
Yeah, just under 500 votes.
All right.
Okay. Niles has another comment for us as well. For future battery surgery, could you use a mobile X-ray scanner and simply drill out the cell? He does also have a comment for me. He says, there is also Wright's law. When production doubles, cost drops by 15 to 18%.
Interesting. The term X-ray did come up in some of our discussions. How would we be able to isolate?
Right.
Was that a tongue twister?
A little bit.
Yeah. So yeah, that did come up. We would love to get our hands on one. And unlike Sandy Munro's organization that will actually go out and buy one to destroy it or take it apart, we're not quite funded the same way as his organization is.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet.
So we have another picture for you guys. If you can bring up seat-1. And this again was from the Tesla Roadster owner site. This is a customer that was complaining about the squeaking and creaking seats. And he ended up deciding that he's going to tackle this himself. And we found this fascinating because he took out his seats. And let me tell you, Tesla Roadster seats are not easy to get out. There's almost like hidden hardware that you have to have almost special tools to get out. But he was able to take his seats out. And what he ended up finding, if we can go to seats-2, there we go. those 4 bolts apparently were loose, completely loose. And this rings true with what we're beginning to find as the Tesla Roadsters age. The front shock mounts, the upper, we're finding in a majority of Roadsters are actually loose. And we had one here. I don't think I have it with me anymore. But what ends up happening is, as it begins to move with the shock, it then elongates the mounting holes where the shocks mount, and also creates noise, of course, rattling, banging, that type of thing. So it's interesting that the Roadsters, as they're aging, are beginning to loosen up a bit. And the fix for that would have been back in the day to use C's compound and, something to lock those, or use a different type of hardware. But this is one of the things that we are now digging into with the Roadsters as we work on them, is to try to find any places where the hardware is loose. As this particular customer says, he says he's pretty sure that these loose bolts are what was causing the creaking noise of the seat. And he ended up also greasing up the rails just for good measure, because remember, it's like a sliding drawer. And grease definitely makes that go a bit smoother. Not that you move your seat a lot in a Roadster, but if somebody else gets in to drive, they may want to move it closer.
Well, if you're my size, you just smash it to the back and and live with it. Or if you're one of our other taller customers, you have the Roadster modified so that the accelerator pedal and brake pedal are not quite so close.
Got another news item here from, again, the Tesla Roadster site. A lot of good information floats on these sites regarding issues with the cars. This customer said, I removed my tire to fix my water pump, and I noticed that it was a little stuck due to rust. Should I put grease or something on it before I mount the tires to make them easier to install or remove in the future? Well, one of our suspension experts chimed in, Mike Manning, and he says, I use a small amount of anti-seize, and a tiny bit goes a long way. It's not a must, though. And then a Joachim Vogel chimed in, and he said, they usually use a copper paste for that purpose, since it is more heat resistant. Probably doesn't, or it probably ages better, too.
Yeah, probably would. Another, hey, while you're looking up the next story, we have another comment on TikTok from Van Goat Wagon. He says, Pete's going to be Mr. April for sure with that picture.
Well, thank you, Van Goat Wagon. There's some pretty decent pictures that are beginning to be sent to this company, so we'll see. All right. We've got, let's talk about the Chinese Roadsters a bit then, and we'll bring up a bunch of pictures here for you. VIN number 1107 is a folder out there, guys, and we can start with the first picture, which is 200A. Now, the biggest revelation here was, well, a number of them actually. On the first one, the service plug was not pulled. Hope springs eternal, and some of us were hoping and praying that the battery packs might have survived 13 years of storage. We won't know that until the other 2 Roadsters come out, and I just talked to Victor. He said tomorrow the next one is coming out of the sea container, one of the very orange sport Roadsters, and we'll also do the same type of reverse engineering on that. We'll look for that service plug. So the first one, no service plug pulled. Now there's an image there. What we found was there were rodents that took up residence in the drivetrain portions above the skid plates. Fortunately, they did not get inside the cabin, because that's pretty well sealed with the door shut, unless you're a tiny rodent, I guess. But these must have been bigger ones. They did, however, get to the wiring harnesses to the doors, and they created some damage there to the wires. But inside this portion of the drivetrain, just above the skid plates, you can see how clean things are, and then dirty at times. There's a bit of flash rust on the half shaft to the far right. Then the shaft itself is reasonably clean, but as you get toward the wheels, you can begin to see the rodents may have been sitting on top of that and discharging as they do.
Mm-hmm.
The thick, heavy orange phase cables that are going to the drive motor in a car that's been driven are typically discolored from dirt, dust, even grease at times. We can go to the next image here. These are the two PEM cooling fans underneath the rear trunk. And then there is an electronics module between the brush motor fans, which is the TPMS receiver. The wiring harness on this was chewed a bit. You can't quite see it from this image, but you can see how there are certain portions that are fairly clean, and then again, other portions that are showing some signs of rodent activity.
Now, for brush motors like that, because they haven't been used, they're likely going to be good. They're
Yes.
they're not going to age over time like some of the other components of the car would.
That is correct. These DC brush, the brush motors have two different wear items. One is the bearings, since these haven't been turning, and they're not exposed to moisture and water. Those should be in good shape. The second portion is the actual brushes themselves, which are, picture a pencil eraser.
Right.
Eventually, it's going to wear down to a nub, and that's what a DC brush motor does to the brushes as the armature or the commutator is spinning continuously. We expect these to be in fairly good shape as well, although they'll go through a thorough test before we decide on that. The next image, it's the rear view with the skid plate removed. The upper right again is the motor, three-phase AC induction motor. The transaxles are in the upper left and upper right-hand portions, and then the ESS battery pack showing all of the 11 sheets and the plumbing. Now, the rubber parts were like new. We tested them for both compression and for any signs of cracking or any sort of deterioration. However, if we go to the next image, you can then see the plumbing connections that go to the sheets. This is the lower rear. These are cast aluminum, and they're showing some signs of corrosion. This is a fairly thick cast part, so the corrosion we don't think is going to compromise the functionality of this plumbing.
That reminds me of salt corrosion. Is it possible that that's what that is?
That's what we were thinking too, since these were very close to the coast, and it was, of course, salt water because it's the ocean, and you have ion migration coming inland.
Right.
It's a good possibility that's exactly what we're seeing here. The rodents would have had a difficult time up because this is up about 8 inches from the skid plate, and it doesn't look like they were, using this as a perch. So yeah, salt is our first clue here that what may be going on here. Now, if these batteries ever get replaced, Tesla replaces the sheets and these types of connections. So all of this will be new if this ever gets a replacement 3.0 battery pack. To clean this up, soda blasting is our most likely response to this. The next image. And here you can see the amount of debris on top of the front skid plate. There were even a couple of bags that were pulled in by the rodents, most likely. Pack rats will do this kind of thing. They collect stuff. And both the rear and the front skid plates now have been pressure washed, and they're beginning to look brand new again. All right, and the next one, I think, shows the front portion of the car. And what's visible there is what's called the crash box, and this is a Lotus holdover. Its function in life is to absorb impact so that the frame is somewhat spared during a front-end collision. It is made out of carbon fiber, and in a moment here we'll see the tag that's on it, which also has an interesting bit of provenance on it. There's a TPMS sensor in the front there as well. Remember the one in the back? And then the wiring going to the horns, one on each side, and the TPMS sensor. This wiring harness was also nibbled into. They were probably testing the insulation to see if it was delectable or edible.
Or if it was a soy-based or not. Or...
Right. The other thing is on the horn on the right there, you see some of the hardware. The Phillips tin-plated screws show some flash rust. And again, that's probably some salt that may have migrated through the air into this cavity. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Jesse, for zooming in on that. And then the next image shows the chewed wiring harness that goes to one of the horns. And they gave up once they got the copper. In some places, it's chewed through the copper. What the strategy there was, I have no idea. But we'd have to, AI would probably be able to decrypt at some point in the future what rodents are thinking, but not at this point.
Sure.
All of this wiring, by the way, will be replaced. And then we have another image here. This is the tag on the crash box. And what we found interesting here was the molding date 4/10/10. So it corroborates that these are 2010 Roadsters. There was a sign-off acceptance. And it also mentions the Lotus Elise. So this looks like a Lotus part and Exige. Also, there's a mention of Tesla Dark Star. Now, remember, Tesla, in fact, there's an image here, Jesse, if we can bring that up as well. I think it's out here. It's called Dark Star. This was this was terminology that early Tesla used to.
Dark Star is the same image. Is there another one? Oh wait, hold on. Let me see Dark Star 2 maybe. Okay.
There we go. And, you know, I'm not into pop culture that much, but this apparently was a movie by John Carpenter called Dark Star, which inspired the early Tesla people, maybe Elon, because they not only used Dark Star as the code name for the Roadster project, but White Star for the Tesla Model S project. So interesting that it showed up on the tag there as well. So if we can go into a different folder now, and this one is going to be the VIN 1107. Let's see. No, that's where we were. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, after Dark Star. Okay, we want to go to another image that is called 200G, Jesse. And what we found here is the C-clips that hold on the skid plates. In some places look brand new, and in other places were corroded and rusted pretty badly. One of them even snapped off. It was so badly rusted. So again, it shows that rodents they can create some damage, especially to metal parts. All right, let's see what else we've got here. Then in the next image, the driver's rear wheel control arms. In further, that sway bar looks pretty new and clean, but up further, it looks like this is where the rodents may have nested, or at least hung out. And wherever that took place, there was some debris and some residue. What we're going to do next with VIN 1107, we have a pressure washer outside. We're going to jack it up, and we're going to pressure wash the bottom and the cavities on this 1107 to get rid of some of this rodent residue. And what we're hoping is that it will look as clean as some of the other new parts underneath this Roadster. In the next image, you can see the wheel housing and the rotor mounting bracket. Now, unpainted cast parts like this are raw. They're there's nothing to protect them from humidity. And after 13 years, this is the amount of flash rust that we found on that particular part.
On the brake rotor itself, that flash rust would disappear probably the first time you used your brakes.
As soon as you drive it, yes. Yep. Which is a common way to tell if a Roadster's been driven for a while, because if you see flash rust on the rotors, you know that the car has been stationary for some time.
Right.
In the next image, We actually were surprised to find that one of the Bilstein shocks had a leaking cylinder, and you can see all of the oil around it there. Now, this was a sport roadster, so it had the canister, which you can barely see in the upper left-hand corner there. When we replaced the shocks, by the way, on the Tesla Roadster, there were two versions. There was the performance and the non-performance on the base versions, and then the sport versions got the shocks with canisters. All of ours are the performance version shocks, and they do have a canister. And by the way, Bilstein Shocks is a German product. It's surprising that it failed after, well, 13 years.
Right.
Yeah. All right, the next image is one of our mechanics that is using a borescope. It's an optical instrument that's designed to assist us with visual inspections in the narrow places or the difficult to reach cavities, such as the running boards. And we found ample evidence of rodent activity. And in the next picture, we're going to do a close-up of the borescope, and you'll be able to see the nibbles that have taken place there. The running boards underneath a Tesla Roadster, both on the right and the left, are basically cavities, and it's a favorite hangout for rodents. That's typically where they build their nests, which is a much better place than inside the cabin.
Sure.
So again, all of this wiring, all these wiring issues will be resolved in these Roadsters, and they will be ready to be put back on the road or go into a museum once we're done. I think that's about all the images here that we have, Jesse, that are new. For those of you that are interested in seeing the rest of the images, if you go to our website, to the Roadster matchmaking site, we've been updating the listing with all of these images, and there are a lot more out there than the ones that we just showed. All right, Instagram, a Zena Car Care Service says, or a Zena Car Service, there we go. I follow your work, very good. We also perform maintenance on Teslas, only here in Brazil. Well, thank you for joining us in the Tesla repair business and joining us from Brazil.
Yes, and good afternoon to you.
All right.
Got a lot of questions.
Yeah, Niles has a question for us as well. He says, I know a Russian who built one for himself from cheap eBay parts. I am into mining a little bit, and we're thinking of getting one there too. You guys maybe can help us with a little bit of context on that one, because that sounds like it's missing some context.
Hold on one sec.
While we do that, Van Goat Wagon on TikTok says, what else were in the containers with these Roadsters?
In the first one that we pulled out, it was packing material, styrofoam. In the second one, I believe it's just a car, but in the third one are some crates. And preliminary look-see by the sellers in China, actually, indicated that there are Tesla Roadster parts. We're talking about doors, fenders, some of the interior trim pieces. And at this point, we're still not certain what the purpose of that was. One of the early people that chimed in is a Roadster historian, Tom Greiner. And he said, you know, part of that purchase, he believes, were 4 Roadsters. And remember, these were purchased for a reverse engineering effort, and we don't know how far they got into this effort before they went bankrupt. So it's possible that one of the cars actually did make it to the autopsy place where they were going to reverse engineer these Roadsters. And since the battery and the PEM is missing, that would be an obvious thing that they would be interested in.
Sure.
Fenders and tires and wheels and even the frame would not be of interest. But that's also puzzling because one of the frames of 4 is also missing. So we have enough body parts to put together a car if we had the frame, PEM, and the battery pack.
And
Yeah.
battery pack. And that would also mean that some of those parts are likely going to have a VIN number on them. For example, where do you have the information about your car, your manufacturing, and your tire pressures and stuff like that? That usually is a sticker that contains VIN numbers and will sometimes sit on the pillar of your car, but sometimes it'll sit on the door itself.
Well, that'd be interesting. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That might give us that fourth elusive clue
Yeah.
that we're looking for.
So Niles, to get some context on Niles' comment from YouTube, he was talking to us about X-ray scanners, that they're not expensive, that customs can use them for finding contraband and tires and things like that. And then he says, I know a Russian who built one for himself from cheap eBay parts.
Oh, okay.
And then
Okay,
he
an X-ray
says,
unit. Yeah.
And then he says, I am into mining a little bit, and we're thinking of getting one there too for his mining operation. So, okay, that makes more sense. Thank you guys very much for bringing that together for us.
Excellent idea, Niles. Yeah, thank you. So what else were in the containers? Howdy from Thunderbird. Yeah, Lightning Rod is joining us.
This
TikTok. Yeah, this guy says, and he's looking at the plumbing that's coming out of the ESS battery pack. He said that looks like normal oxidation due to moisture. Salt would be a higher degradation. Same oxidation is present on your average alternator or any given vehicle.
Okay.
All right, thank you. It is aluminum, cast aluminum, so yeah, it would follow any type of degradation aluminum would go through.
And then Van Goat Wagon says to this guy, asking, is this electrolysis? So I would say that is definitely a possibility there.
From Instagram, Fabio Tessa says, hello, guys. How are you? We're doing fine. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And Van Goat Wagon speculates that the running boards in a Tesla Roadster are made of cheese, along with the moon, most likely.
I think so. I think that's, that is as good a working theory as we have of any.
Right. Jesse, we've got another image to pop up. This one's called Easton. And before this image pops up, have you guys noticed that there are a lot of Roadsters for sale lately? It's been spiking.
Yeah.
And we have 3 of them now. This will be the 3rd one, actually. Haven't even advertised it yet on social media, the other 2. And this 3rd one is coming along here shortly. And it's a variety of reasons. Some of them are medical reasons. We have a number of sellers that have recently gone through forms of surgery that can no longer, because of a knee surgery, get in and out of a Roadster. Sometimes the widows are selling Roadsters. So it is a variety of reasons, but the inventory right now of used cars is higher than I've seen it in, well, ever, actually, since we've been involved. This will be a 3rd car that will be on our Roadster matchmaking site. It's up in Utah, and this is a wrapped car. If you're into wraps, this is a pretty interesting color combination. Easton is a bow and arrow manufacturer, and they decided to wrap their car based on their company. One of the conditions of sale here is if someone has some real heartache over this wrap and doesn't like it but still wants the car, underneath all of this is a sterling silver Tesla Roadster. And it's going to come with a number of options. There will be a wall charger, one of the early Martin Eberhard chargers, the 240-volt chargers. And all of this information will be available on our Roadster matchmaking site within the next day or 2. So we wanted to promote that particular car before it gets listed for you guys.
You were talking about cars. There was one car we were talking about a little bit pre-show, and it was on Bring a Trailer. I went ahead and just pulled up that car because the auction was happening this morning as we went live.
Right now.
And that auction has now been concluded. A 2011 Tesla Roadster Sport with an R80 3.0 battery pack. Doesn't say if it's the 2016 pack or not. $84,000.
Oh my God. Yeah, they're I think the prices are reflecting the bloated inventory. By the way, that's a 2016 pack, it turns out.
Ah, okay.
And that may be one of the reasons that it sold so low. The reserve was actually met around 75,000. So that's a legitimate auction. Somebody poached this car.
Yeah. So, the person who bought this car looks like, based on the comments, it's somebody who at one point owned a Roadster, sold their Roadster, and they were looking to get back into one.
And regretted it, yes.
Real quick, Pete.
Yeah.
We just got a note from one of our employees here that apparently a couple of guys are here for a meeting with you. Are you aware of that?
No, it's probably a sales call, and they're misrepresenting themselves. But have one of the managers take it.
Okay.
Claude, Greg, any of them.
Yeah. Well, Claude just sent in Elvis to tell us, but I'll talk to him.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we get that all the time, by the way, with 7 commercial buildings here. Door-to-door sales is still a big thing, even in commercial facilities like this, in industrial compounds like this.
Oh, and it's amazing. You'll get the people that'll be coming for who knows what.
Yeah.
I get the bankers.
Oh, the bankers, okay.
All the bankers,
and they all ignore a sign on the front doors of all our buildings: no soliciting.
Yes.
And they come in, I didn't see that. Or they will scare the receptionists into an audience with the CEO by saying something like, we're with the State Department and we're investigating blah, blah, blah. And it's all BS,
Of
right?
course.
They are they're trying to get business, with something associated with that agency.
Thankfully and fortunately, we have a very, very good receptionist now. And I don't see any of these people.
Good. Okay, yeah, they screen them.
At worst, I get a phone call where she says, "Are you in? Somebody's here to meet with you and says that you have a meeting scheduled."
Oh, that's the other one, yeah.
And I'm like, "Nope, I'm not in, or I'm in a meeting with somebody else, or
Yeah.
I don't know who this person is. Have them give you their information, and I can get back to them." She's very, very good at that.
Yeah. Or these investment services, and they'll misrepresent themselves on a win. Well, Pete Gruber and I have spoken, and he asked me to call him back.
Yeah.
Then I get on the line because they always tell me they're supposed to qualify. What did they say? And I get them on the line, and I say, wait a minute, you're trying to sell me on financial services, and you've misrepresented yourself on the way in. You've lied to my receptionist, and now I'm supposed to trust you with our company's finances? How does this work out for you? And then it's usually click.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, we didn't mean to digress here, but
that's a fun little rant, I tell you.
So we've got a sunglasses question. Clarence Barnes: we wear sunglasses for a variety of reasons, all of which will be released in a future video at some point in time. And this is usually where we have a sales pitch for an accessory for sunglasses.
You get me today. So we've got these awesome sunglasses cases for sale at, I'm looking at Richard.
They are $79.99. But
Where?
if you on the Gruber Motor Company website, Gruber Motors, but if you use code Aaron or Richard, you get 10% off.
They're also magnetic.
Yes, magnetic. And they're very soft calf leather, too.
Yes.
They feel great. It's almost like a buttery feel. So for those of you that want to get a better experience watching our podcast, I suggest you put on your own sunglasses, and things may change for you.
They just might. Van Goatwagen even said to Clarence, the sunglasses are mandatory.
Yeah. Crunch to Grace Hopper, he says, number 13, catching up from greater than an hour back. See you in comments. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Crunch. And then if you guys could scroll back up, there was one that we had missed. Standards New York on Instagram says, loving our Roadster. Thank you, Gruber, for getting it back to its glory.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
So it's glad to have you on the show, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah. We enjoy what we do, folks. Working on Tesla Roadsters is not quite like working on Chevys and Fords and, even the Lucids or the other EVs. It's a fun, highly colored, two-seater sports car. It pins you back in the seat, and we've gotten very good at them. We enjoy... when you're really great at something, it becomes a lot of fun. It's kind of like musicians. It's second nature for them to create something spectacular, or even artists, painters, sculptures, that type of thing. So that's the kind of passion that we bring to our Roadster Gruber Motor Company service center every single day. And it's contagious. we hire people, and you can see them as they evolve begin to grab that same passion.
Oh, definitely.
All right, we've got another picture to throw up there. There's a repair organization. If we can bring up Weise-PEM Cooling, Jesse. Ben Weise in the UK, I'm sorry, Neil Weise. He actually has a unusual cooling method for the Roadster power electronics module. And this first image we're going to bring up here, you'll see what was posted on Facebook. The problem with Roadsters is the original design called for a cooling intake on the sides, kind of like the Ferrari 308 vents. You've got one for water and one for the oil cooler. These were both supposed to be the intake ports for the PEM cooling portion. Now, the reason the PEM needs to be cooled is because it switches high voltage and high currents with IGBT transistors, which generate a lot of heat as they're doing their job. Just like in our critical power world,
Right.
we deal with a lot of heat sinks. In fact, I have one here. Hang on, folks.
You know, and while you're pulling that up, Leroy is a man after your heart, Pete. On TikTok, Leroy G has said, "I found an original Roadster charger at a garage sale."
Oh, you're a man. That is quite a score. I don't think I've ever seen one at a garage sale. Would love to, but let us know, Leroy. Was it the MC240, which is the thick garden hose variety 240 volt charger, or was it the yellow charge cable, which is a 14 gauge wire? 12 gauge, sorry. Yep,
Yeah.
much thinner. So this is the heat sink. A transistor. Oh, I happen to have one from the last show. All right, let's do this. There's an insulating material that sits on top of the heat sink, and then the transistors, which has a metal backing on it to dissipate heat, sits on that insulating material, and it eventually gets clamped down or bolted to the heat sink to transfer the heat from the transistor to this heat sink. And then down below, you have fans that are moving air across all these fins, just like the radiator in your car, to cool the power electronics module. It's a fairly stable, antique design, but still works quite well. So the problem is, the Roadster was not quite ready to be released yet, but they had to in order to remain solvent. So the
Right.
compromise was, and you saw it earlier in the Chinese Roadsters, they put 2 DC brush motor squirrel cage fans fairly low in the car, just above the skid plate, with some vents in the back of the car. The problem now becomes, this is a vacuum cleaner, and it's constantly sucking dirt, leaves, dust, and debris in through these heat sinks, which eventually clog up. And this is the reason that every year they suggest you have an annual preventive maintenance on your Roadster, where the PEM gets blown out and cleaned to restore the ability to cool these vital transistors, which have 400 volts with hundreds of amps on them, which is what drives your drive motor, by the way. So in this picture that we had up here, and if we can bring that back up, you can see that the side vents now are connected to a duct, which then goes down below and eventually to a, can we see it there? To a filter. And you can see some of the debris in the filter. Now, if you have this modification done, then you may not need to have annual preventive maintenances done anymore, because that filter, if you can clean that out yourself, will take care of the problem.
So basically, you're replacing an air filter once every 12 months or something like that.
Just like you do with your ice, carbureted ice vehicle,
Sure.
or even fuel injected, where you change a filter instead of having a preventive maintenance done, which is far more expensive. Now, there is no kit that I'm aware of that can where you can purchase this yet. And if it becomes popular enough, we'll put something like this together. If you take a look at the next picture there, Jesse, it's
Yeah, that one right there.
yep. What you're seeing there is a base woofer that's inside the quarter panel on the driver's side. And just above it is that vent. And there's an adapter that apparently was fabricated, which allows that vent now to become active and direct air to the fans down below through that filter. See if we have another image there. Yeah, and there you can see where it's mounted, where the filter gets mounted. So this is probably going to be a fairly cool design, and we'll check with Neil Weise and see how this is working out for him. Neil, by the way, is the UK Tesla Roadster Repair Organization, and he's been doing great work over there. He finds different problems than we do. For example, front-end condenser assemblies. That's the two spall fans mounted on top of the AC condenser. Those tend to rot in the UK because of all the rain.
Okay.
And when you get leaves dropping down in there, the front of a Tesla Roadster has hood vanes that have big gaps between them. And any of that type of debris that's coming down from trees or whatever will eventually land on that condenser assembly, which is aluminum. You get that mixing with water. The leaves are somewhat acidic, and you end up getting aluminum degradation and leaks.
Oh, okay, okay. Boy, I hopefully we can get in touch with Neil on this particular piece. I mean, this is why we have test mules. If we could get one of those and bring it into the South in our southern climate and see how it performs in the heat.
Sure.
And whether or not there would be enough airflow to be able to handle the heat, because that would be my one concern.
Yeah. And by the way, we are working on the Tesla Roadster overheating problem. We talked about this in the last session. Our chief engineer is actually analyzing different, well, I have it right here, different dielectric insulating materials. And it turns out that there are different coefficients that will transfer the heat more effectively than others. And also, we're working on the correct clamping voltage to clamp that transistor down onto this material and eventually onto the heatsink to improve the thermal characteristics of transferring heat from these transistors to that heatsink to get rid of that heat.
I understand. Well, we're starting to get kind of close on time, so I want to make sure we get through the last couple of questions here. The one I'm going to jump down to, though, is from Two Shades of Gray on TikTok. He says, what year Roadster is more collectible? I'm thinking about buying one.
There are a number of factors that make a Roadster collectible. Low mileage ranks way up there. A low VIN number ranks way up there. And that could even, it's most likely a signature series car. The first 100 in the U.S. And the first 250 in Europe, because there the signature series ran to 250. Some people like 2008s more, and others like the 2.X, especially the 2.5s, because they have a what they feel is a nicer grill with the fish grills on the side. What you're seeing behind us there is a 1.5 Roadster with a 1.5 nose cone. The later versions had a bit more detail in that front nose cone. To give you an example of what Roadsters sell for and why, there's a 1,300-mile Roadster. It was a 2.5 that sold for just over $2,000 about a year ago on Bring a Trailer.
$200,000.
$200,000. Another one sold at $200,000 or so. It was celebrity owned. It was the Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer's car.
Yes.
With profanity on the carbon fiber plaque. It was a Signature 100 car. So it had two things going for it, celebrity owned and Signature 100. A validation prototype 22, it was a 1.5 Roadster, just sold on Bring a Trailer a couple of weeks ago or so for $136,000, which was way low.
Yeah, that one
considering what some of these other cars are selling for. It did have an R80 pack, and it was a 2016 version, which simply means you add $30,000 to $35,000 to the price of the car because you're going to have to change that out soon.
Right.
The highest one so far that has sold, a Legacy Tesla Roadster, was VIN number 13 with 894 miles. Sold a couple of years ago on our Roadster matchmaking site for $295,000. So that one broke the record. Now we have the 3 Chinese Roadsters, which, by the way, are not 0 mile. It turns out that the story began to evolve. Tesla test drove Roadsters to 30 miles back in the day. Then they realized that they had some infant mortality issues, and they changed that 30-mile test drive limit to 100 miles. We have a Roadster right now in our service center that was believed to have 8 miles on the odometer. It turns out it has 38 miles, which would be consistent with, this old practice of driving at 30,000, giving it to an owner to then start adding miles.
Yes. And then and we're expecting, as we get the other 2 of the Chinese Roadsters out of their container, that they're going to be up just above 100 miles.
Right.
Or the red one was 109.
And that's how we found out about this change in test drive mileage. Was the first Tesla Roadster we pulled out that had never been driven or titled, other than test driving, had 109 miles on it. And that's when we found out that that particular vintage was actually test driven to 100 miles after they found out they needed to flush out some more QC problems with the later model Roadsters.
Yeah, and shout out to Michael Aldea from, he joins the podcast on a regular basis. When we were talking about this, I think it was just last week, in fact, Michael chimed in and shared this information live with everybody here on the podcast.
So as far as collectability, it's a preference. Do you like the 1.5 look? Do you like the 2.x look? Time will tell what the collectors find to be most attractive. But the time-tested, proven, old, rules regarding collector cars is low production runs, which a Tesla has, 2412 production, low VIN numbers, celebrity-owned, signature series. Did I leave any out?
Well, the very last VIN numbers, the really, really high ones, 1467, are going to be collectible, and the ones that are really close in the U.S. that there were 500 1.5 Tesla Roadsters made. So if you get VIN 499 or 500, it's basically the last of that production run. Or if you were to pick up 501 or 502, well, that's the first of the 2.0 production run. Those become notable as well.
You mentioned 501. 501, sadly, was a Phoenix car that was sold to Tesla, part of the buyback program, and it currently sits in Long Beach in the back lot, and it's been parted out.
Oh, it's so sad.
So, now in retrospect, I'm sure that Tesla may have preserved that car, but at the time they bought it, collectability wasn't that big an issue yet.
Yeah,
it was the first 2.x Roadster, very orange.
Yeah, they were. That was at the point when the Teslas were worth maybe a quarter of what they are now, and Tesla was having parts issues. So two more questions. It looks like we have from Niles. He says animal smells can be removed by an ozone generator.
Do you know Niles is intuitive? We just received our ozone generator yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the ones we lost in the building, but we are putting those into those Chinese Roadsters currently. Even though there's no rodent activity in the cabin, we felt that it would.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, serve it well if we put an ozone generator in there.
And then finally, Crunch to Grace Hopper on YouTube says a recent Aptera video said that the use of relatively small high voltage modules allowed their battery management system to isolate and logically remove damaged cells. Is that true?
I've always wondered how you could put a battery management connection to every single cell. In a Tesla Model S, it'd be 7,104 in an 85 kW pack.
Right.
That's a lot of wiring. That's a lot of logic. That's a lot of, So what they do is they tend to cluster them into groups of parallel connected cells. But that would be the ideal ticket. Is now not only do you have a indication which cell is going bad, but you can then isolate it through software, or it self-isolates.
Yeah, and to me, the theory would hold. And if you, all you would need to have would be, let's say you group your batteries into groups of 5. Now on a 69 cell brick, if you're grouping it into 5, you're already down to just 14 connections.
Mhm.
And so as long as those connections are in parallel, taking from a software standpoint, seeing that one of those sets of 5 is not performing the way that the rest of them are, you just take it out of series, or you take it out
Circuit. Yeah,
of the
just take it out of
circuit.
circuit.
So the theory seems to me like it would hold very well.
Okay.
But I haven't heard on Aptera though.
All right. I think social media is trying to speed us up by taking all the questions away and reserving them for the next podcast. Tricky, guys. There were
Very
a few
good.
more. Yeah.
Very
Stop going over time. We're good to wrap up.
All right. So we're going to wrap up. Appreciate all of you joining us as always. Just one more thing, Jesse. When we started these Roadster podcasts, I thought to myself, are we going to have enough material? Is there going to be enough to talk about? Will there be enough interest? And you can see that it's beginning to build exponentially.
Yes.
There are topics that we haven't even gotten to yet. So we're here for you. We're here to continue this. Please join us. Feel free to post topics, email us, anything that you'd like us to talk about, ev@gruber.com. And again, this is our gift to the Tesla Roadster community, along with the many other things that we do.